morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Lifestyle with Dr. Moby. I'm Dr. Moby, and I am honored with great guest Anne from Netherlands today. How are you doing, Anne?
I'm great, thank you.
Okay, great. So let me talk a little bit about Anne, and she will probably better give introduction herself. Anne is a accomplished podcaster, and she does a lot of coaching about podcasting. And also, she was attorney by her profession before. And let's learn from her. How are you doing, Anne? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for having me, first of all. And yeah, like you said, I coach podcasters. I help podcasters to create profitable and impactful podcasts. And I do that by offering masterminds or working with clients one-to-one. And yeah, I love it. I think podcasting is great. It's a huge market right now. So I think we're in a great market and there's a lot of demand for it. So yeah, that's what I do. I usually work with female podcasters who are also business coaches or something related to that. A lot of coaches who have a podcast, and it's a great way to also find new clients, find new leads for your business. But I also work with podcasters who don't have a business and just want to be a podcaster for like as a separate brand, separate business, which is also amazing. So yeah, that's what I'm here to talk about today.
Okay, very nice, very nice. Thank you. So tell me, how did you start podcasting and interest and so forth?
Yeah, well, I started podcasting about 1.5 years ago, so not too long ago. Before that, I always listened to a lot of podcasts. So I was a consumer before that. When I was still in university, I listened to a lot of podcasts, and that is also how I decided that I wanted to start traveling. I live as a digital nomad, so that means that I travel while I work remotely. So now I'm in the Netherlands, but a few months from now, I'll be gone again, somewhere where it's a lot more sunny and somewhere on the beach probably. And I learned that this is possible through podcasts. So for me, that was really powerful. It literally changed my life. And then I wanted to do something to work online while I was traveling. And I took an online course to be a podcast manager. So that's how I started to work in podcasting. I just helped other podcasters with editing and writing show notes and uploading everything and managing the podcasts. And after that, I started my own podcast and I learned a lot from working with all different clients. So after a while, after about 1 year, I realized that I could help my clients even more by telling them what I experienced and what I learned. So that's when I pivoted into more podcast strategy instead of podcast management. And that is what I've been doing now for the past, few months, half a year probably.
Very nice, very nice. I was reading that you basically did first also MBA and also you were in legal department, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, I got all my degrees. I had my idea, my vision, my future plan was to become a lawyer. I wanted to do mergers and acquisitions for big companies as a lawyer. That was always my dream. And then I got all my degrees. I studied for a really long time. And then I realized that is actually not what I wanted to do. So when I realized that was not what I wanted to do, I was quite lost and I didn't really know what the alternative would be for me. That is when I started traveling because I just didn't know what else to do. I always really loved traveling. So I was like, okay, well, now I have the time. I don't have to study anymore. So I worked at a bar in university. So I did that for a few more months after I was done, and just to save up money to go traveling. And while I was traveling, I had time to think about what I really wanted, and I realized that I didn't want to go home, so that I had to find a way to make money online. And that's when I learned a lot about podcasting and about working with podcasters, starting my own podcast. And that's what got everything going. That's where it all started.
Mhm. That's very nice, very nice. So tell me about what you have seen so far about podcasting. As we know, there are a lot of podcasters. So tell me a little bit about, the beginners. Where do they go wrong, or what do they can do right?
I think one thing that many podcasters do is that they focus a lot on audience growth. And I'm not saying that it is a mistake, but I also think that you can do it another way. And that is how I help my clients, because how I help my clients is that we monetize the podcast before we focus a lot on audience growth. And that is because I believe that you don't need a huge audience to monetize your podcast. It is usually not about the download numbers. And I compare download numbers a little bit to likes on Instagram. It doesn't say that much. You can have a very profitable podcast with low download numbers, or you can have a podcast that is absolutely not profitable with very high download numbers. So it doesn't necessarily say anything. So it doesn't make sense, I think, to really focus on download numbers. I think it's very important to think about monetization strategy before you really dive into how to grow your audience. And a few ways how you can monetize a podcast with a small audience is, for example, selling your own products or services, or by using affiliate links. Those are ways that I really like to monetize podcasts. And you also don't have to be super salesy or spammy for your listeners or anything. That's not that you don't need to do that at all. So it's a very nice way also for yourself when you're still building your brand and growing your audience. You can easily do that. And I think that is something that not many podcasters do. And I think they should maybe consider that, because when you monetize your podcast, even if it's not about the money for you as a podcaster, it still opens a lot of doors, because you can also choose to reinvest that money into your podcast, and you can use that to grow your audience even more. So I think that is, you can get a snowball effect there if you do monetize your podcast from an early stage.
Yeah. No, like you said, those are all baby steps, and they all actually help to go to the next step. And not all the numbers matter. I mean, you could have so many downloads and still not make anything out. And so that makes absolutely great sense. So tell me, what kind of podcast are less and which one are more? Like which topic people usually pick more?
Well, there are podcasts about literally everything. I talked to a lady and she had a podcast about birds. So that was quite specific, I think. But they're literally podcasts about anything. Like every topic has a podcast nowadays. I mean, that's what it feels like, at least. And I think that's a good thing. I think there are very niche podcasts that are very specific to a topic, but there are also the broader podcasts. So I work a lot with business podcasts or marketing podcasts. A lot of entrepreneurs who use a podcast for their business. That's just the podcasters that I usually work with. But I mean, they're literally podcasts about whatever, like anything you can think of, there is a podcast. And I think as long as I think when you're interested in a topic, then there must be other people who are interested in a topic, right? So I think that's only a good thing.
Yeah, that's a pretty good thing. But are there any topics which you feel that there are not as many and there should be?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Like birds, you mentioned about birds for sure.
Yeah, I think there could be maybe more hobby podcasts, if that makes sense. So there are a lot of business podcasts already, business coaches who share their tips and advice and do interviews with other business coaches or people who can say anything about that. But I feel like there could be more podcasts that are just entertainment. I think that is really still upcoming, and there could be more of those. And that doesn't mean, if it's an entertainment podcast, doesn't mean that you cannot make money or use it as a business. You can get sponsorships or affiliate marketing, what I already mentioned. So it doesn't mean that it is not a business for the podcaster, but I think if it's entertainment for the listener, we don't have that as much yet.
Hmm. So we don't have much. And what about those political podcasts? Are there more news, views, and politics, or less?
Well, I only know here in the Netherlands, and there are a lot of we actually we have the elections coming up in a week and a half, and there are many parties with a podcast. So I
Oh,
feel like here I don't know where like how everything is in the rest of the world, but here in the Netherlands, more and more political parties use podcasts, and I think that's also a very clever move because you have this long form content when you have a podcast that you can really tell your story. So it's not Instagram or Facebook where you have to be very quick in making your point and you have a 60-second Instagram story to say what you want to say. But if you have a podcast, you can really take your time to explain what you want to explain and to tell people about your vision and about your opinion. So I think it definitely makes sense for political parties to have a podcast.
so tell me also a little bit about with all the podcasts and so much media, which we are grateful. Um, Still, I feel that with COVID, we had so much negative media. So so much negativity, so much of misinformation out there. Um, you think there is something we should be doing better?
You mean like for the negative media that it
Yeah.
that's a difficult question. I'm not sure if I know the answer to that. I think many people are afraid, and that means that people mm, yeah.
Yes.
I'm not so sure about that. I think it's also depending on the podcast. So for example, on my podcast I don't talk about COVID at all. It's not really relevant, and I think you can as a podcaster you have to make a decision if you want to talk about it or not, if you want to be a part of that negative attention that you will spread.
Mm. So I think I'll just rephrase it beside COVID. So what I have seen is, like other things too, like for example, better eating, healthier lifestyle. Okay. But on the other hand, people actually gravitate more towards the other information. So if there's a, fast food ad, so, and they do probably better job than us explaining the whole concept. So they are people tend to eat more and they think that is the right way. And then when we are talking on podcast about lifestyle or anything good, there are very few. We are nothing as compared to the information which is. I mean, I see patients all the time, and they unfortunately they watch TV, and which is nothing wrong with that. But this bombarded with ads for food industry, bombarded with ads from drug industry, um,
Mhm.
and has no relationship to health, as we know. And then so it's creating so many problems, for everybody
Mhm.
to, in regard to their health, in regard to. So are they doing better at marketing than us?
Mm, well, I think if I understand correctly, I think as a podcaster, I think it's very important that you think about the ads that you include in your podcast, if that makes sense, because it's also part of your brand.
Mm,
And like you said, if you include ads for fast food chain or something unhealthy, then you basically expose your audience to that. And I think as a podcaster, we have to be very careful when we do that. And the beauty of podcasting is that you're the boss of your own podcast. You're really in charge. And I think it's very important to also take responsibility there and think about what you show or what you include in your podcast.
Mm. And many times I tell a lot of my viewers as well as my patient and everybody. I said, the problem is never any particular brand. It's the approach, the thinking behind it. And then that has to improve, and that starts with us. You, me.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like it's like we can give money. People can have money, but how they spend it is the wise person. Like, so how everybody could have money, but some people have a lot more money and they can waste all that money and then do nothing out of it. They can buy cigarette, for example. But on the other hand, there are people who are savvy and they will save some and then they will invest and they will grow, right? So same thing, the resources, even the food industry, even the lifestyle, even anything. If people are not careful, then unfortunately they just ruin it. So that's what I always. So I think we as podcaster, as in media person, I always feel that somehow we are still learning how to educate, how to convince, how to even at least share our point across, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe come across as this is the right way. Or so I still I don't know I always feel that we are lacking, or at least I am. So trying to learn better ways, what constitute or what can make people go for the better direction. It's like, if you're driving on a road and if you miss the exit, and then if you, if the sign wasn't clear, B, you were not paying attention, right? Or all of the above, right? So the question is, if we have repeated markings or repeated signs before you miss, and it's somehow, so at least most people, not everybody, but most people will take that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I do agree with you that as content creators, we have extra responsibility and we have to be extra careful. And also, I think an important question to ask ourselves is if we include ads or if we do brand collaborations, to ask ourselves, is this in line with our own brand?
Mm.
I think that is a very important question that not every podcaster asks themselves,
Mhm.
because it is also I believe it's also harming your own brand and your own long-term strategy,
Mhm.
if you have a brand deal that might be good short term because you get money for it, but then in the long run it's not always a good decision. So
Mhm.
I think it's very important to think about that as well.
Yeah, that's true. That you could be actually just maybe getting a little bit money, but you are saying your message is totally different, and
Mm-hmm.
then the people will get confused about which way or what is the real message here. Is it the real message, the big one, the one you're talking, or the one, the ads, 1 second or 2 second ad or whatever, 30-second ad comes between. So that is always, very interesting to notice that, people, they don't think that far enough yet. So also tell me, so how do you keep yourself motivated doing what you're doing podcast?
Yeah. Yeah, I understand the question because a podcast, when you start, it's all very exciting and new. But I also see many podcasters that after 5 or 10 episodes, maybe 15, it's not as exciting anymore. And maybe it's just, I don't know, like maybe the download numbers are not what you expected. And it's very easy to take a break and not come back ever, or maybe after a few months. So yeah, I think it's a very good question. What I do is I already knew that this was something that happens a lot, so I wanted to protect myself against that. So what I do is I work in seasons for my podcast. so that I know, okay, I'm doing this amount of episodes and then I'm taking a break. And I create the episodes. I do batch creating. So
Mm-hmm.
I record all the episodes in 1 week. I record probably like 4 or 5 solo episodes in one day. So then it's done. It's here. It exists. I edit all of those episodes the next day or the next week, doesn't matter. But I always work a few months in advance. So now I'm already, I think I'm till May. I already have my episodes ready, and then I know when I also know when I take breaks so that I can create a season and then I can be like, okay, now I created a season. I'm ready for now. I can just take a break, relax, and then when the new season is coming up, I know, okay, I need to start batch creating again. I need to make time in my schedule to do this, and then I'm okay for a few months again. So that's how I like to work, and that's also how I keep myself motivated, so that I don't have to think about it every single week, but I can just create it and then sit back, and then create again and sit back. And if I'm really busy and I don't have time to create new episodes, then I can just take a longer break, which is also fine. But then I also need to decide that beforehand, and I think that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, how often is your podcast coming? Is it weekly? Is it do you?
I have 2 episodes per week. On Monday, I have an interview, and on Tuesday, I do a solo episode.
Also, you have two types, and I haven't listened to your podcast yet. But what are the topics do you do?
I actually have 2 podcasts. So I have one podcast that is the Podcast Babes. It's all about podcasting. So it's a lot about how to monetize your podcast, probably my favorite topic, but also about growing your audience. And this week's episode is about how to relaunch your podcast and why you should consider relaunching your podcast after podcasting for a while. I also have another podcast. It's called Digital Nomad Stories. And that's more my hobby project. It's just a passion project. It's not doesn't really have anything to do with my business, but it's just because I really like podcasting, and I interview other digital nomads who have an interesting story to tell. So today, that's just weekly episodes, once a week on Monday as well. So, for example, this week I have an interview with a lady who has done working holidays in Australia and New Zealand, and she had a really good experience there. And then she started a travel blog, and now she is a writer. So we talk about her story, and that's just because I think that is a lot of fun. I just really enjoy doing that.
No, that is true. When I'm doing look at I never thought I would meet somebody from Netherlands talking about podcasting and so forth. It's always exciting, and I with COVID, that has Zoom has of course pushed all kind of new avenues for all of us. So we are connecting. I have my guests from Singapore, from all parts of the world, a lot from Europe. So of course we are in States and a lot of here too. But I find it very interesting, and everybody has a unique story. Everybody has such a unique aspect or vision or thoughts, and even just talking about that is fun always. I find it very entertaining. To me, that is really motivating. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
so
I
we,
agree.
we talk and we say, oh my, that is interesting thoughts, and that kind of opens up new thing in our thought process. I mean, I never thought I would be hearing somebody about podcast monetization. I mean, that's always on your mind, but kind of as a topic, people are kind of struggling still. A lot are struggling still. So I think I would have everybody check your website. You can give your website, and maybe I'll try to type it while you tell me.
Yeah, so the website is thepodcastbabes.com. There you can find everything, and also I'm also on all social media platforms at the Podcast Babes. The podcast is also called the Podcast Babes, so I'm the Podcast Babes everywhere.
Okay, so let's put that here for people. The podcast. Okay, so that is the correct website, right?
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Okay, so the people can check that, and that's a very interesting concept. And as we learned a lot about a lot of things, monetization as well as the podcast and what are the risks and so forth. It was great talking to you. Any final thoughts or comments you would like to share?
I just want to thank you very much for having me on the show. It was really great to talk to you.
Okay, well, thank you for coming, and people, please check our podcast, and wish you great success and keep podcasting and guiding us. Take care.
Thank you.